Hello! Today we're going to be doing a Q&A about my house build. Okay, so I have written down some questions that people asked, and I'm going to go through and answer them and just talk about a few things about my house. I am not at my house today, I am at a park. I was going to film outside, but my neighbors are working on things in their yard, so I thought the park would be a nice spot, and it's a beautiful day out today. Okay, so we'll start with the first question here is, what made me want to move here? Somewhere that is a bit rural, especially for me coming from living in only major cities my entire life. So I was born in Dallas, and I spent about half my life there, about half my life in South Florida. So that's going to be the Miami area, and that's where I lived the longest. So I kind of just wanted a different lifestyle than the city. It was very congested, and I wanted to have land, grow food, have a more self-sustaining lifestyle, and not be so dependent on outside sources. The city is also, it's a lot more expensive. You have a lot more conveniences, and you pay for that, you know. Here, it's a bit more affordable, although it can be harder to find, to work in these types of locations. You know, so there are pros and cons to living somewhere that is more rural versus the city. I think they kind of even out. It really depends on what you want. So the question specifically asked me what made me want to move off grid. Now, initially, I did want to have my house be fully off grid, and I'm sure I'll implement more of these systems later on. However, I am on grid as far as electricity goes. It cost me about, I think it was $320 to get my electric hooked up just for the charge from the electricity company in my state, not including the cost to have somebody else come out and dig a trench, and for the supplies, for the conduit, for them to run the wire underground and into my power box. So that is not including my meter box that I purchased, but it would have been a lot more expensive for me to get solar, and I use a lot of kitchen appliances, so for now this is working great, and I would still need to learn how to set up an off-grid system. It's a lot to learn at once, so that'll come in the future. The next question is, why did I choose the layout of my house? So the layout for my house had changes several times, and there was some adjustments to the planned layout for this house because I was initially going to put a garage. Now, that would have added some expense, and I ended up changing the layout of the house. Not set up to have the garage because it would have been going over budget, had some things change, had to adjust. I might have a garage in the future, but it will have to be a slightly different layout. So the way My house's setup is pretty much two rectangles turned in opposite directions, connected together. So you have the open concept main living area, and then the bedrooms, bathrooms on the other side of the house. I had thought that I wanted to do a 2-story house at first, and I also thought that I wanted to do a tiny house. I ended up expanding the layout of my house to basically future-proof my house plans. Right now it's just me in my house, but I'd like to be able to accommodate guests and growth in my life. So I ended up adding more rooms to accommodate for that, and adding square footage in the end didn't really cost that much more. It was a little bit extra, but the main expenses for my house have been acquiring the land and getting running water to my house. So that's gonna be my septic system, my well, the well pump, and just the plumbing for the house. That's been the most expensive part, those two things, other than the entirety of the house. But on an individual, piece by piece, what costs the most, those things are the most expensive. So adding more square footage, and in fact, doubling the square footage I thought I was going to have, it's worth it. The value that I get out of it, it's well worth it. So I was also a little bit nervous about having a 2nd-story house because I have not built a house before this. I have not worked with contractors before this. I didn't have as much experience, and I just felt more comfortable making it a single story, as well as future-proofing again. You know, if I live in this house for the rest of my life, which I may or may not, I don't know. You know, it's just easier when you're older to walk around on one floor. And I have recently lived in a 2-story house, and it's just nice to have everything on one level. Now, as far as my layout, I ended up deciding to have the kitchen and the bathrooms all be on one wall, which is gonna be my wet wall. So everything being on this wall saves a little bit of money as far as your plumbing. And because it's an interior wall inside of the house, all of your plumbing is insulated. It does get to negative temperatures where I live, and you don't want toilets, sinks, any plumbing running on your exterior walls because they could freeze. So the way that the house is set up, it makes sure that none of these items are going to freeze, and pretty much just simplified it. I just have one 2x6 wall, and that covers all of the plumbing. Minus where the water comes in for my tankless hot water heater and the laundry room. Now, I have had a question of why is my laundry room in my bedroom? I had a few different designs for houses that I drew up, and I wanted the washer and dryer in a closet in one version. I wanted it to be near where my clothes go. So in Florida, I was looking to buy a home in Florida at some point, and I toured a lot of new construction houses. A lot of those new construction houses had the washer and dryer stacked in or right next to your closet, and it just made a lot of sense to me. You don't have to walk around, you don't have this extra area so much that's needed for a laundry room. So being that it's just me or if I have kids in the future, I'm gonna be the one doing laundry. So I wanted it where it was convenient for me. That's why it's in my bedroom. Also because I did change the layout to not have a garage anymore. I needed to move and accommodate that somewhere inside of the house, and that's also where it ended up. If I had a garage, I would have placed the washer and dryer potentially in there and had a separate space. Those were the options. Did I finance or did I save up for this house? So I did not use any financing in a traditional sense. I have used financing in terms of using a credit card. I used a rewards credit card for some of this towards the end. Most of the money came from me working, investing for a long time, saving. I invested heavily. I worked a lot of hours for many years. So for about 7 years, I worked full-time plus overtime, second job, resold stuff on eBay, and I just invested as much as I possibly could. I think that if I had just saved that money in a bank account, it wouldn't have had anywhere near as much of an effect. I invested in a 401k, a Roth IRA, and a taxable brokerage, also an HSA. And I had a pension, a private pension, from working at FedEx. And I lived with family to be able to save and invest 60% of my income, sometimes more, and just cut expenses where I could. I mean, I still lived and enjoyed my life while doing this, because you have to. It's a long journey to be able to save and invest, and you know, that's part of the reason why I left South Florida, was because the house prices after 2020 doubled in like a year. So it wasn't worth it for me to invest in that area anymore. I wanted to move somewhere where my money would have more value. And I will absolutely say that moving to another state, moving somewhere else where I never lived, didn't have family, I moved here by myself with my dog. It was the best decision that I ever made in my life, and I was so glad that I took a chance to do this, even though I didn't know what I was doing. You do things and you figure them out. That's how you learn. I am still working and saving and working on my house little bit by bit. So every week or every other week, I'm able to take some money from working, take some money from selling things on eBay. I do have multiple sources of income, and I take that and just build this house little bit by little bit. You know, it doesn't have to be all at once, although in my head, I still want it to be. I'd still like it to be. It's teaching me a lot of patience to deal with this. But doing it this way, I own my house. This is my house and my land that I own. The bank doesn't own it. I mean, I still have to pay property taxes every year, you know, but I like this area so much, and I enjoy knowing that my property taxes go to improving this area, actually, because they're doing some good things. You know, if you don't like the area that you live in, you can move, you can change it, and I think that's just a wonderful, beautiful thing. Somebody asked me, why is my toilet so close to the tub? Because it is. It's a small guest bathroom. Not fully knowing what I was doing, you know, changes had to be made on the fly during building. That's okay. I hired contractors they did about 75% of my foundation. They did my framing, my roofing, and we had some plans that I drew up. I used a free program to make some plans on my tablet, and we went off of that for door, window placement, layout. We made some changes, like we went back and forth and we talked a little bit, and we made some changes, they made some suggestions. I liked some suggestions they made, we ended up changing some stuff, and I was prioritizing a bigger closet in the master bedroom, but I decided to shrink that closet, you know, and created a little bit bigger of a bathroom. Also, so in my guest bathroom, you have bathtub, toilet, sink. The original layout that I had in mind was bathtub on this wall, and then toilet and sink were here on this wall. Well, because of my joist, my wood joist underneath, the toilet would not fit that way with the plumbing for proper drainage for code. It would be facing that way. Toilet had to be facing this way. So my plumbers were like, hey, this is what we need to do to get this to work. So that's what we did. It was a pretty simple fix. It'd be fine. The bathroom door should just barely open with this layout. Some things are a little bit quirky with the layout, for sure. Okay, so what did I hire for and what did I do myself? So when I purchased this land, it was completely raw land. I could not even park my vehicle on it. I had a coupe, small coupe, so I couldn't even get my car up on my land initially. So originally I was actually staying on my property in a tent and camping. First time I had ever gone camping on my property. I hired somebody to come in with a chainsaw and start cutting down trees so I could clear a space for where the house was going to go. So I hired for that. So I was originally going to do this 100% by myself because I saw people on YouTube do it. I said, well, they can do it. I can do it. You know, everybody starts and learns from somewhere. And in the United States, you are legally allowed to be your own contractor on your property if you are the owner. You do still need to pass inspections and be up to code, but every county, every state has different requirements. The area that I live in doesn't have really strict requirements, like somewhere like California, which, as far as I know, might have some of the strictest code requirements. They also use different years of the code books, so it might not be the most current version. However, mine is the most current version because I learned that afterwards. So mine is future-proofed, I guess, for this area. To the highest standard that I could get it. And so originally I had thought, okay, I will buy a shed. I was looking at just the materials. I was looking at the pre-built ones, and I didn't really know what I was going to do for my foundation quite yet. The person who came to cut down the trees, they gave me some really good recommendations. and kind of went with that. So I hired a contractor to help me do part of the foundation in the next coming months after some tree clearing. So I learned to set some posts down for this type of foundation that I have, which is the solid wood beams, which are ground contact pressure treated. And we did the original layout for the tiny house, so I believe that was like, what was it? Like 16 by 30, something like that. Now, I ended up deciding to add more floor space. It had been a couple of months in between. One contractor was busy, so I ended up hiring another contractor, and they finished the rest of the layout. So I extended my original 16 by 30 to, I think I ended up going for, it ended up being 22 by 30 for the main area, which has the kitchen and living room. And then I added on another rectangle for the bedrooms and bathrooms, which was, it's gonna be 24 by 32. Added that on, so that's continuous to the back, and added that rectangle in the front. They did the rest of the foundation. They did the framing of the house. They custom did my roof trusses, built me an attic space, and they also put my metal roofing on, as well as putting the sheathing on the outside of the house and the house wrap. Once that was done, I had been studying the electrical code for several months and summarizing, asking people questions, asking people different ways that they did things. You know, almost every time I spoke with somebody, realizing that I needed to do more research, that I couldn't just get easy answers, that I really needed to know the code. Because other people, most people are not going to know the code. I mean, there are people who work in the industry every day who don't know the code. So I spent a lot of time studying that, and I did the rough-in for the electrical. I did have a friend kind of help me with showing me, okay, you need to drill holes here, this is probably the best way to run this, and kind of showed me, okay, this is how you're gonna wire something. Well, that way I could go and I could wire stuff and make it easy. So I did the rough-in for the electrical, and then I had an inspection for the rough-in for the electrical, and I passed. Now, I was really tired mentally by the time it came to the plumbing. So I hired one contractor, and I did end up having some issues there. So they got some stuff done and didn't get completed. So I ended up having to hire another plumber to finish the rough-in for that. Had another inspection for my plumbing rough-in that passed, and I was given the go to put insulation in. So I was given the go to put insulation in after the electrical rough-in was done, but they told me, you know, hey, we need to be able to seal the plumbing. So once that plumbing rough-in was done, I was able to finish the insulation. So I did all of the insulation. I did have a little bit of help with the insulation that is in my vaulted ceiling. I had assistance from somebody who was taller than me, since my ladder is only so high, and the other ladder I have that goes like this wasn't really practical for this application. So I had a little bit of help there. But all of the wall insulation, I did all of that. It was fairly straightforward. Really suggest to do that kind of stuff when it's cooler out, so you can wear long sleeves and the particle mask, the particle filter. That way you're not breathing in fiberglass and you're not all itchy. It didn't bother me as much as I expected when it did get on my skin. But some people get really itchy. I probably want to run your clothes to the washer twice. With my construction clothes, I would try and soak them first before throwing them in my washer. Not beat my washer up. So after that, I had the go to close up the walls, and that's when the drywall started. I have been fortunate enough to have people help me. Talking to people and befriending people who are really nice in this area when I moved here has been like my saving grace, just because people are really nice and willing to help. And so I've had some help, and I had a friend help me get drywall up. I bought a lift from Home Depot. I think it was like 180, like $200 for this lift. It was a 16-foot lift. And we used the lift to get all of the drywall on the ceilings. They helped get me started in some of the wall areas. And then it came down to crunch time where I needed to move. So I just started getting the drywall up however I could, because I had a deadline and I needed to move. And that was fine. The drywall has been fine. I've had some suggestions that I should hang it sideways because there's less stress on the drywall, but I have seen professionals hang the drywall this way and this way, so vertical or horizontal. In professional applications, it depends on what country you live on. What I have learned is just the most important, like what you need to do, which was what I've done for the drywall pieces, is you just need to make sure that it has edge carry. You want your edges to be on a stud. Now, there was a window or two where I just ended up putting the drywall up. I didn't have edge carry, and this is on a load-bearing wall, and that drywall has cracked. So I am now going to have to take this drywall off, place edge carry inside, and redo those pieces. I didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal, but hey, you learn the best by making mistakes. You fix it, and then you move on with your life, and then you don't make the same mistakes again. That's just how life is. Now, then I started mudding and sanding, and I realized that mudding is like the bane of my existence. So I just kept pushing, and it's like 2.5 months in of just doing mud and sanding and mud and sanding and mud and sanding, and I'm just like singing in my head, just keep mudding, just keep mudding, just keep mudding, just to keep going, because it's starting to get ridiculous. And I realized that I needed help, because some areas weren't looking that great. After I painted, I noticed some imperfections. So I decided to hire somebody to just do the finish for mud, and then do the few areas that I hadn't already mudded. So basically I did the initial taping layer with the tape, mud tape, and then they can come in and they do one coat and it's done, and they're excellent. I barely have to sand, which is great. They don't like sanding, so they got their skill to that level. And I'm really happy that I did that. And that's pretty much the point that I'm at now, is still gonna have them come for a few times to finish that so I can paint. I have been working on this house since December of 2023. Right now, as I'm filming this video, it is October of 2025, so it has been almost 2 years that I've been working on this house, and I'm at a point in which I just would like this to be done. I'm living in it. I don't like living in a mess, so hiring people to get certain things done is great. It took me so much time and so much effort to learn to do these things. Like, is it worth it to do it yourself? In some instances, yes. In some instances, no. There are some things that I wish I had just hired for, because, and me paying rent and the time that it took and the stress that it took, it really is worth it to hire a professional. But I've learned so much, and this has been such a fun experience. Like, can you do it? Yes, absolutely. Is it easier to do in some states than others? Yes, absolutely. I would not attempt to do this somewhere like California, no. Although I think there are counties in California where you are allowed to homestead and like do your own stuff and like not start decoding in like Northern California. So, check your local code requirements, what permits you need, wait times for permits, and all of that. Yeah, so I think this video is long enough at this point. Hopefully I answered the questions that some people had. And if anybody has any more questions, please feel free to ask. I will answer them. Oh, and one more thing. There was some questions on me starting this late and me building it. I didn't know if I wanted to film. For a lot of it, my life has changed many times in this process, and what I wanted to do has changed many times in this process. So I've taken a lot of pictures. I haven't always taken a lot of video because I had people helping me and I was learning things. I questioned, like, is this beneficial for me to put on the internet? Because I don't 100%, it's like my first time doing something, and even though I've studied and I did pass my inspections, you still have this, like, the back of your mind is this good enough to be putting out there? I will try and go through some of my videos and put together some content. The whole process. I do have some videos of like my land being excavated and some other things. And I will try and put those together. But yeah, I just kind of started in the middle. The best time to start was 20 years ago. The next best time to start is today, type thing. Anyways, thank you for watching and have a blessed day.